The sound of my husband's voice was colder than the marble countertop I was gripping. "You really think you're entitled to anything after this? After what you've done? You'll never see a dime of my family's money, Amelia. Not a single dime." His words didn't just hang in the air. They seeped into the expensive Italian tile, the custom cabinetry, the very bones of this house we built together. They were a final verdict, delivered not with a shout, but with a calm, chilling certainty that left me breathless. And if you've ever felt that icy shock of betrayal from someone who promised to love you forever, then you know why I had to make sure every single one of you heard this story. Stick with me, because what happened next, nobody saw coming. I need to take you back. Before the coldness, before the lawyers, before the inheritance papers that changed everything. I need you to understand the before, so the after will feel as real to you as it does to me. My name is Amelia. Amelia Reed. For 15 years, that name felt like a promise. It was the name on a mortgage application for a charming craftsman bungalow with a porch swing, the one we could barely afford on a teacher's salary and a junior architect's income. It was the name whispered in the dark by a man who brought me coffee in bed every morning for a decade. Mark. Mark Reed. My husband. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was ours. It was built on inside jokes over burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings, on the quiet solidarity of holding hands during tough times, on the dream that we were building something lasting, brick by emotional brick. We struggled. Oh, how we struggled. We ate more ramen noodles in those first 5 years than I care to remember, and a date night was a Redbox movie and a shared bottle of cheap wine. But we were a team. Mark and Amelia against the world. I remember one night it was pouring rain, and the roof in our little bungalow sprang a leak. Right over our bed, we dragged the mattress into the living room, put a bucket down, and instead of crying, Mark made a fort out of sheets. We lay there in our blanket fort, listening to the rain drum against the ceiling, and he held my hand so tight. "Someday, Ames," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "Someday, we're going to live in a house so solid, a hurricane couldn't put a dent in it. I'm going to build it for you, I promise." That was my Mark, the dreamer, the promise keeper. Or so I thought. The change didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, insidious shift, like a fog rolling in off the ocean. It started when Mark's architecture firm landed a massive account, a luxury hotel chain. Suddenly, the late nights weren't about struggling to meet deadlines. They were about schmoozing clients at steakhouse bars I couldn't pronounce. His paycheck tripled, then quadrupled. The ramen noodles were replaced by organic, grass-fed everything. The craftsman bungalow was sold, and we built our fortress, the hurricane-proof house, a sprawling modern monstrosity of glass and steel that overlooked the ocean. It was everything he'd promised. And it was the beginning of the end. I should have seen the first crack. It was so small, so seemingly insignificant. My 40th birthday. My sister Chloe had flown in from Chicago to surprise me. She'd organized a small, intimate dinner at my favorite Italian place, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the old man who plays the accordion. It was a piece of our old life. Mark was late. Of course he was late. When he finally swaggered in, his tie loose, the scent of expensive whiskey and someone's faint floral perfume clinging to his jacket, the whole table fell silent. He didn't apologize. He just pulled out the chair, gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek that didn't reach his eyes, and flagged down the waiter. "We'll need a bottle of your best Barolo. And lose the accordion player, will you? It's depressing." He said it with a laugh, but it wasn't a joke. Chloe's face tightened. "We like the accordion player, Mark. It's part of the charm." He glanced at her, his smile not quite masking the condescension in his eyes. "Charm is for people who can't afford better. We can afford better." He turned to me. "Right, darling?" The word darling felt like an insult. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning. "The accordion is fine, Mark." He shrugged, dismissing me, dismissing all of us. The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in humiliation. He held court, talking over everyone, bragging about his latest project, a multi-million-dollar seaside development. He made a show of paying the bill with a black titanium credit card, leaving a cash tip so large it was obscene. On the way out, he patted the accordion player on the shoulder and said, "Keep the change, maestro." In the car, I was silent, staring out the window at the passing lights. "What's wrong with you?" Mark asked, his voice sharp. "You should be happy. I just made your birthday dinner unforgettable." "You embarrassed me, Mark," I said, my voice small. "You embarrassed Chloe. That wasn't you." He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "That's exactly me, Amelia, the successful one, the one who pays for your life. Maybe you're just embarrassed that you're still just a kindergarten teacher, playing with finger paints while I'm building empires." The words landed like a physical blow. Just a kindergarten teacher. He'd met me when I was a kindergarten teacher. He'd said it was the most important job in the world. He'd said my passion for it was what he loved most about me. I didn't answer. I just turned back to the window, the first real fissure of fear opening up in my heart. For a few weeks after that, things seemed to return to a surface-level calm. Mark was busy, always busy. He traveled more. The house, our hurricane-proof fortress, felt emptier and emptier. I'd wander through the vast, minimalist rooms, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors, and feel a loneliness so profound it was a physical ache. I tried to talk to him. I'd make his favorite meal, coq au vin, the way his mother taught me, and wait for him to come home. One night, I waited until 11. The food was congealed, the candles burned down to puddles of wax. He finally texted, "Stuck at the office. Don't wait up." I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I was a knot of anxiety. What if he'd been in an accident? I did something I'd never done before. I called his assistant, Jessica. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice a bright, professional chirp. "Mark Reed's office. This is Jessica." "Jessica? Hi, it's Amelia. I'm so sorry to bother you so late. I'm just worried. Is Mark still there? He's not answering his phone." There was a beat of silence, a fraction of a second too long. I could hear faint music in the background, the clink of glasses. Not office sounds, bar sounds. "Oh, Mrs. Reed. He just stepped out to get coffee. Yeah. We're pulling an all-nighter on the Seabreeze proposal. It's a nightmare." Her voice was too high, too rushed. "Right," I said, my own voice flat. "Coffee. Okay. Well, tell him to call me when he gets back from his coffee run." "I will, absolutely. Gotta go." She hung up before I could say another word. I stood in my silent, spotless kitchen, the phone clutched in my hand, and I knew. I knew with a certainty that turned my blood to ice. He wasn't at the office, and Jessica was lying for him. The betrayals started to multiply after that. They were small, at first. A charge on our credit card for a boutique hotel in Napa Valley. A weekend I'd spent visiting my sick father. When I asked him about it, he didn't even flinch. "Client meeting," he said, not looking up from his tablet. "Took the team for a wellness retreat. Thought you saw the calendar invite." There was no calendar invite. There was no team. It was just him and someone else. The gossip started next. I'd walk into my yoga class, and the conversation would suddenly die. Women I'd considered friends would look at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I started getting these looks at the grocery store. At charity galas, I was now expected to attend on Mark's arm, smiling like an idiot, while he schmoozed, and I felt the weight of 100 whispered conversations. My supposed best friend, Sarah, finally confirmed it over a too expensive lunch she insisted on paying for. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Amelia, people are talking. You have to know. It's Jessica, his assistant. They're not even being discreet about it anymore. They were at the Sterling Hotel bar last Thursday, all over each other. I saw them with my own eyes." The world tilted. Jessica, 26 years old, with glossy hair and a relentlessly positive attitude, and a laugh I'd once found charming. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I pushed my salad away. "Why are you telling me this, Sarah?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because you're my friend," she said, her eyes wide with faux concern. "And because, well, you need to be smart." He's making a fool of you. Everyone knows it. You need to protect yourself. Get a lawyer. Get your finances in order before he cleans you out." It felt like advice. It felt like friendship. But a tiny warning bell was ringing in the back of my mind. Why was she so eager? Why the urgency? The irony was, during all of this, Mark started being nice again. It was the cruelest twist of all. He'd come home with extravagant gifts. A diamond bracelet, a purse I'd once admired in a magazine. He'd suggest weekend getaways, just the two of us, to reconnect. He'd hold me at night and whisper how much he loved me, how stressed he'd been, how he was going to be a better husband. And God help me, a part of me wanted to believe him. This was the man I'd built a life with, the man who'd built me a blanket fort in a leaky living room. He was manipulating me, and I was letting him, because the alternative, facing the truth, was too terrifying to contemplate. He was deepening the bond, making me trust him again, just so the fall would be that much harder. The stakes escalated from humiliation to something far more concrete. It started with the vacation home. Mark's father had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a beautiful, rustic lake house upstate. It was Mark's childhood sanctuary, and his mother, Eleanor, had insisted it stay in the family. We spent weekends there, and it was the one place where the old Mark seemed to return. We'd fish off the dock, make love in the creaky brass bed, and for a few precious hours the fortress of glass and steel would feel a million miles away. One Sunday evening, as we were packing up to leave, Mark was on the phone with his lawyer. He thought I was outside loading the car. "Yeah, just draw up the papers to transfer the title," he said, his voice casual. "Put it in the name of the LLC, MR Holdings." "Yeah, no, she doesn't need to sign anything. It's not in her name." I froze on the porch, my hand on the door handle. The lake house. He was transferring the lake house into a business entity I'd never heard of. When he came out, I tried to keep my voice calm. "Mark, what's MR Holdings?" He didn't even blink. "Just a new shell company for the firm. Tax purposes? Boring stuff. You wouldn't understand." He brushed past me and tossed his bag in the trunk. I did understand. I understood perfectly. He was moving assets, isolating them, preparing. Then came the conversation about his mother. Eleanor Reed was a formidable woman in her late 70s, sharp as a tack and with a heart of gold buried under a layer of old money propriety. She'd always loved me, treated me like the daughter she never had. She'd been sick lately, in and out of the hospital with heart troubles. We were driving to visit her one afternoon when Mark said, "We need to talk about Mom's estate." My stomach clenched. What about it? "She's not getting any younger. Her will is a mess. She's far too sentimental. She's got you in there for a chunk of her personal trust, the one my grandfather set up. It's worth about $4.2 million. $4.2 million. The number hung in the air-conditioned silence of the car. That's incredibly generous of her," I stammered. "It's irresponsible," Mark snapped. "That money is family money. Reed money. It should stay with the bloodline. I've been talking to her about revising the will, cutting that part out. I need you to be okay with it when she brings it up." I stared at him, my mouth agape. "You've been talking to your sick mother about cutting me out of her will?" "It's not personal, Amelia. It's business. It's about legacy. You'll be taken care of by me. You don't need her money." But I heard the real message underneath the words. "You are not family. Your 15 years mean nothing. You get nothing." That was the shift. The moment the fog cleared, and I saw the betrayal for what it truly was. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just midlife crisis cruelty. This was a calculated, financial dismantling of our life together. He was systematically erasing me financially and emotionally, preparing to discard me with nothing. The humiliation, the gossip, the lies, they were all just tactics. The real war was over money, over property, over my entire future. The isolation that followed was absolute. I tried to call Sarah, to tell her what was happening with the will. Her phone went to voicemail. I texted her. No response. A week later, I saw on Instagram that she and Jessica were at a spa together, laughing in matching robes. #besties, #treat yourself. She hadn't been my friend. She'd been his spy, feeding him information, feeding my fears, all while pretending to be on my side. My sister Chloe was 1,000 miles away. busy with her own life, her own new baby. When I did call her, crying, trying to explain the layers of betrayal, she tried to be supportive, but I could hear the distance in her voice. Ames, are you sure you're not just paranoid? Maybe Mark's just under a lot of pressure. The lake house thing sounds like normal business. And the will, that's Eleanor's decision. Maybe you should just talk to him. She didn't get it. Nobody did. I was alone in my hurricane-proof house, watching the man I loved become a stranger, and everyone I thought was in my corner had quietly left the ring. I became a ghost in my own life. I moved through my days teaching my kindergartners, their innocent joy a stark contrast to the rot in my own world, and then I'd come home to silence. Mark was almost never there. The house was a museum of a dead marriage. It was on one of those silent, empty nights that I made a decision. I was not going to just roll over and disappear. If this was a war, I would need weapons. I needed proof. My first discovery was an accident. I was looking for a checkbook in Mark's home office, a room I was usually banned from entering. His desk was locked, a fact that now seemed incredibly suspicious. But he was careless. He kept a spare key taped to the underside of his bronze bulldog paperweight, a habit from our old bungalow days he'd never broken. My hands were shaking as I opened the drawer. It was a mess of papers, paper clips, and expired business cards. And there, nestled at the very bottom, was a sealed envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize, Fawcett and Associates. It was addressed to Mark. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a cover letter. Dear Mr. Reed, per your instructions, we have prepared the final draft of the petition for dissolution of marriage. As discussed, based on the prenuptial agreement you have provided and the current structuring of your assets, your spouse will be entitled to a one-time settlement of $250,000, relinquishing all further claims to marital property, including the primary residence and any business holdings. Please review the attached documents and advise of any changes. Sincerely, Robert Fawcett, Esquire. I sank into his leather chair, the paper fluttering from my hand. Dissolution of marriage. A prenuptial agreement? We'd never signed a prenup. We'd been broke kids in love. We'd laughed at the idea. The $250,000 was an insult. It was less than a year's worth of his bonuses. He wasn't just preparing to leave me. He was preparing to annihilate me. I heard his key in the front door. Panic seized me. I scrambled to shove the letter back in the envelope, back in the drawer, lock it, replace the key. I was out of the office and pretending to be watering a plant in the hall when he walked in. He looked at me, his eyes narrowed. What were you doing in my office? Nothing. The fern looked dry. My voice was too high. He didn't believe me. He walked past me into the office, and I heard him jiggle the drawer handle. He knew it had been unlocked. He came out, his face a mask of cold fury. You went through my things. I stood my ground. The fear was being burned away by a white-hot anger. I found a letter from a lawyer, Mark. Robert Fawcett. Care to explain? He smirked. It was a cruel, ugly expression. So you know. Good. Saves me the trouble of having to tell you. Yeah, I filed for divorce. You've been miserable for months. You're holding me back. A prenup? We never signed a prenup. Of course we did, he said smoothly. You just don't remember. You were so emotional that day you signed a lot of papers. He was gaslighting me, blatantly and confidently. And $250,000? That's it? After 15 years? After everything I gave up for you? For your career? It's more than you deserve, he said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You'll live off it for a year, maybe 2. Then you can go back to teaching. Maybe find some other sucker to build you a house. That's when I lost it. The anger, the betrayal, the months of loneliness and humiliation erupted out of me. I screamed at him. I called him every name I could think of. I cried. I begged him to tell me why, to tell me what I had done to make him hate me so much. He just watched me, cold and detached, until my rage spent itself into ragged sobs. When I was finally quiet, he walked over to me. He didn't touch me. He just looked down at me, a king looking at a peasant. It's over, Amelia. Pack your things. I want you out by the end of the week. I've already changed the locks on the bank accounts. My lawyer will be in touch. He turned to walk away, then paused, as if remembering one last thing. And just so we're perfectly clear, you can scream and cry all you want, but you'll never see a dime of my family's money. Not a single dime." He left me there, crumpled on the floor of our grand, empty hallway. His words were the final nail in the coffin. I had never felt so powerless, so defeated in my entire life. I spent a sleepless night on the couch, tears drying on my face, a hollowed-out shell of a person. The next morning, my eyes were swollen, my head throbbing. I was mechanically packing a suitcase, my movements robotic, devoid of hope. I was beaten. The doorbell rang. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to see anyone. But it rang again, insistent. I shuffled to the door and opened it. Standing there was Eleanor Reed, Mark's mother. She was leaning on her cane, her face pale but her eyes blazing with an intensity I'd never seen before. She took one look at my ravaged face, my suitcase open in the hall, and her expression softened into something fierce and protective. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's done it, hasn't he? The foolish, cruel boy." I just stared at her, unable to form words. Was she here to gloat? To tell me to leave her son alone? She stepped inside, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "I heard everything. Last night. The walls in this glass house are thinner than he thinks. I heard him. I heard what he said to you." She led me to the kitchen and sat me down at the island. She opened her large leather purse and pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. She slid it across the marble counter towards me. "This," she said, her voice firm, "is yours." I looked at the envelope, then back at her, confused. "What is it?" "Open it." With trembling fingers, I undid the clasp and pulled out a sheaf of papers. The top page had a formal seal, "Last will and testament of Eleanor Victoria Reed." "Eleanor, I don't understand." "Read the clause I highlighted, Amelia. Read it out loud." I found the bright yellow highlight. My vision was blurry with tears, but I focused, my voice a shaky whisper. "Upon my death, the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to the principal of the Victoria Reed Trust, currently valued at approximately $4,200,000, as well as my personal property at 114 Lakeshore Drive and all associated holdings, shall be bequeathed to my daughter-in-law, Amelia Marie Reed, to be held in her name solely and exclusively." I couldn't breathe. I looked up at her, my eyes wide with disbelief. Eleanor's face was a mixture of fury and profound sadness. I revised it last month, after I saw the way my son was looking at that child he calls an assistant. After he had the audacity to suggest I cut you out. I knew then what he was planning. I was married to a man like him for 40 years, God rest his soul. I know the signs, the money, the power, it changes them. It reveals who they truly are. Tears were streaming down my face now. "But Mark," he said. "Mark does not control my money," she said, her voice sharp. "My father built that trust to protect the women in this family from the men. It was always meant for you, Amelia. From the moment you stood by my son when he had nothing but dreams and a pocket full of debt. You loved him for him, not for this." She gestured around the cold, expensive kitchen. "You are my daughter, in every way that matters." She reached out and took my hand, her grip strong. "The papers you're holding, Amelia, they're not just a will. They're a weapon. Use them." The shock was so total, so complete, it was like being reborn. The crushing defeat of last night evaporated, replaced by a surge of power so potent it made my head spin. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't broke. I was the sole beneficiary of a $4.2 million trust. I owned a lake house. The one thing Mark cherished above all else, the symbol of his family legacy, was mine. Eleanor stayed for an hour, her presence a steadying force. She told me everything. How she'd hired a private investigator after her conversation with Mark about the will. How she discovered his affair with Jessica, his plans to transfer assets, the fake prenuptial agreement he'd had drawn up. She knew it all. She had been my silent ally, gathering her strength, waiting for the right moment to hand me the keys to my own liberation. After she left, I sat at the counter for a long time, the inheritance papers spread out before me. I traced my name on the document with my finger. Amelia Marie Reed, heir. This was no longer about saving my marriage. That was dead and buried. This was about revenge. But not a messy, emotional revenge. A cold, precise, legal revenge. I would use his own weapons against him: money, law, strategy. My first call wasn't to a lawyer, it was to my sister, Chloe. This time, when I explained, my voice was steady, clear, and filled with a purpose that got her immediate, rapt attention. "I need you to come out here," I said. "I need your help. And bring the baby. We're gonna need a cover story." 3 days later, Chloe was installed in my guest room, her adorable 6-month-old son providing the perfect reason for why I suddenly had family in town. It was my excuse for everything: why I was taking personal days from work, why I was suddenly always busy. Mark bought it completely. He was so arrogant, so convinced of his own victory, that he saw my sister's visit as a convenient way for me to pack my things and leave without a fuss. He was practically gleeful. What he didn't know was that while Chloe took the baby for walks in the stroller, she was also making drops. She'd meet a woman named Susan in a coffee shop and hand over a USB drive. Susan was the forensic accountant Eleanor had hired. Chloe would go to the library and fax dozens of documents from a secure line to my new lawyer, a razor-sharp pit bull of a woman named Miriam Levine, who specialized in taking down arrogant, wealthy men who thought they were above the law. Miriam's offices were in a sleek, intimidating high-rise downtown. Sitting across from her, I laid out everything: the affair, the financial manipulation, the forged prenup, the lake house transfer, the inheritance papers. Miriam listened, her expression unreadable, taking meticulous notes. When I finished, she set her pen down precisely. "Amelia," she said, her voice calm and assured, "what your husband has done is not just grounds for divorce. It's fraud, it's forgery. It's a systematic attempt to commit financial abuse on a staggering scale. And with these," she tapped the inheritance papers with a perfectly manicured finger, "we don't just have a defense, we have an atomic bomb. We devised a plan, a multi-stage execution. We wouldn't just file for divorce, we would lay a trap." The first stage was silence. Under Miriam's advice, I played the defeated wife. I continued packing. I agreed to meet with Mark's lawyer, Robert Fawcett. I sat in that man's oak-paneled office and let him condescend to me. He slid the divorce papers across the desk, the ones based on the fake prenup. "I know this is difficult, Mrs. Reed," he said, not sounding like he knew anything of the sort. "But it's a very generous offer, given the circumstances. My client is eager to put this all behind him and move on. I'd advise you to sign today." I looked at the paper. The insulting $250,000 settlement. I picked up the pen. I let my hand shake. I looked like I was about to break. And then I put the pen down. I need to have my own lawyer look at this," I whispered, feigning weakness. Fawcett sighed, as if I were a difficult child. "Mrs. Reed, that will only drag this out and incur unnecessary legal fees on your part. You can't afford that." I'll find a way," I stammered, and hurried out of the office, playing my part perfectly. I could feel his smug satisfaction radiating off him. They thought I was a mouse. They had no idea I'd already hired a hawk. While I played meek, Miriam was moving with silent, brutal efficiency. She filed a motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement, attaching the preliminary report from the forensic accountant that showed it was a recent forgery. She filed a lien on the lake house, freezing its transfer due to the ongoing marital litigation. She subpoenaed Mark's business records, his personal bank accounts, and his phone records. The first wave hit Mark not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, bureaucratic earthquakes. He got a call from his bank about the lien. He got a letter from the court about the motion to invalidate the prenup. He got a notice that his business records were being subpoenaed. He came home that night in a blind rage. He found me in the kitchen, calmly making dinner for Chloe and myself. "What the hell is this, Amelia?" he snarled, waving the court papers in my face. "You got a lawyer? You're contesting the prenup? Are you insane? You'll waste every penny you have on legal fees and lose." I turned from the stove, a ladle in my hand, my expression placid. "My lawyer seems to think we have a case. She seems to think the prenup is, what's the word she used? Oh yeah, a fraudulent fabrication." His face went purple. "Your lawyer is a fool. And who is this hack? Some ambulance chaser you found online?" "Her name is Miriam Levine." The color drained from his face. He knew the name. Everyone in this city's legal and business circles knew the name. Miriam Levine was the woman who had taken down the mayor in a corruption scandal. She was legendary, and she was expensive. You can't afford Miriam Levine, he stammered, his confidence cracking for the first time. I gave him a small, cold smile. I have my ways. The second stage of the execution was the discovery process. This is where Miriam's genius truly shone. She didn't just request documents. She buried them in requests. She asked for every email, every text, every financial statement from the last 10 years. Mark's legal team, led by the now flustered Fawcett, was overwhelmed. They were forced to hand over terabytes of data. And in that data, we found the motherlode. It wasn't just evidence of the affair with Jessica, though there was plenty of that. Hotel receipts, love emails sent from his work account, even a joint bank account he'd opened with her 6 months ago. It was so much worse. We found evidence of embezzlement. He'd been siphoning money from his own firm, funneling it into offshore accounts, using the MR Holdings LLC as a cover. We found the fake prenuptial agreement, saved on his computer with a creation date from just 8 months ago. And we found the emails between him and his father's old lawyer, pressuring the man to backdate a document to make it look legitimate. The lawyer had refused, warning Mark it was illegal, and Mark had dropped him and found the slimy Robert Fawcett instead. We had him. We had him on fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and a dozen other charges that had nothing to do with our divorce, and everything to do with federal prison. Miriam planned the final confrontation for a mediation session. She told me it was a classic tactic. Let the opponent think they're coming to a negotiation, to a surrender. Let them get comfortable. Then, pull the rug out from under them so hard they never get up. The mediation was held in a neutral conference room. Mark arrived with Fawcett, both of them looking smug and condescending. Mark was already talking about the renovations he was going to do on the lake house. He barely looked at me. The mediator, a tired-looking man in a cheap suit, started the proceedings. All right, we're here today to see if we can reach an amicable settlement in the matter of Reed versus Reed. Mr. Fawcett, your offer is on the table. Mrs. Reed, have you had a chance to review it? I nodded. Miriam placed a hand on my arm, a silent signal. We have, Miriam said, her voice cool and clear, and we find it laughable. But before we present our counteroffer, there are a few items we need to clarify for the record. She opened her briefcase and began laying out documents, one by one, like a dealer laying out a winning hand of cards. First, the prenuptial agreement you are basing this settlement on. She slid the forensic document expert's report across the table. This is a report confirming the document is a forgery, created approximately 8 months ago. The case of Reed versus Reed will therefore be proceeding as a dissolution of a long-term marriage with no valid prenuptial agreement, entitling my client to 50% of all marital assets. Fawcett sputtered. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Second, Miriam continued, her voice never wavering, the transfer of the property at 114 Lakeshore Drive to MR Holdings LLC. She slid the lien document across the table. This transfer has been frozen by the court as a fraudulent conveyance, an attempt to hide marital assets. The property will be returned to the marital estate for equitable division. Now see here, Fawcett tried to interrupt. Miriam talked right over him. Third, the matter of embezzlement. She slid a stack of bank records and highlighted emails across the table. We have discovered that Mr. Reed has been illegally funneling funds from his architecture firm, of which my client is co-owner, into personal offshore accounts. We have filed a separate motion with the Superior Court to appoint a receiver for the firm, and we have forwarded this evidence to the district attorney's office. They've opened a criminal investigation. Mark's face was ashen. He looked like he was going to be sick. You can't do that, he whispered. Oh, we can, and we have, Miriam said sweetly. But finally, and this is the most pertinent point for today's discussion, is the matter of the non-marital assets. She paused. Letting the silence hang in the room, she looked directly at Mark. Specifically, the inheritance my client is due to receive from the estate of Eleanor Reed. Mark actually laughed, a shaky, relieved sound. That's a non-issue. My mother is revising her will. Amelia gets nothing. That's family money. Miriam's smile was terrifying. Oh, Mr. Reed, you are so very, very mistaken. She slid the final document across the table. It was a copy of Eleanor's new will. The highlighted section glowed under the fluorescent lights. Mark snatched it up. His eyes scanned the page. I watched his face. I saw the confusion, then the dawning horror, then the sheer, unadulterated rage. His hands began to shake. He read it twice, 3 times, as if the words would change. This is a fake," he shouted, slamming the paper down on the table. "My mother would never do this. You forged this. You're a liar." "It is very real, and it has been duly filed with the probate court," Miriam said, her voice like ice. "Your mother, Mr. Reed, is of sound mind and body. She made this decision herself. The $4.2 million Victoria Reed Trust and the lake house you seem to cherish so much belong solely and exclusively to my client. They are not and never will be marital property. They are hers, free and clear." The room was utterly silent. The mediator's jaw was on the floor. Fawcett was frantically flipping through the document, his face pale. Mark stared at me. The hatred in his eyes was a physical force. "You," he seethed, his voice trembling with fury. "You twisted her mind. You poisoned her against me. You greedy, manipulative bitch." I met his gaze. For the first time in a year, I felt no fear. I felt only a cold, calm power. "No, Mark," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I didn't poison her. You did. With every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word, she saw you for who you are. And she chose me." The mediation was over. There was nothing to mediate. He had nothing. His business was being seized by the courts. He was facing criminal charges. And the family fortune he was so desperate to keep from me was already mine. The aftermath was a thing of beauty. It played out in the gossip pages, on social media, in the stunned whispers of our former social circle. Mark Reed, the golden boy, brought low. The DA pursued the embezzlement charges vigorously. With the mountain of evidence we provided, Mark took a plea deal to avoid a trial. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. His law license was revoked. He was bankrupt, forced to sell the glass fortress on the ocean to pay his legal fees and restitution to his former business partners. Jessica, his beloved assistant, dropped him the second he was arrested. Last I heard, she was dating a retired baseball player twice her age. The lake house is mine. I sold the glass house and most of its cold, impersonal contents. I moved into the lake house permanently. It's my sanctuary. I sit on the dock every morning, drinking coffee, listening to the loons call across the water. The creaky brass bed is still there. It feels like peace. Eleanor moved into the guest cottage on the property. We have dinner together every night. She's my family now. She says watching her son's downfall was the hardest thing she's ever done, but necessary. He needed to be stopped, she says, her voice firm. And you were the only one strong enough to do it. The revenge wasn't about the money. It was about justice. It was about taking back the power he stole from me. It was about proving that the quiet kindergarten teacher, the woman he thought was just playing with finger paints, was paying attention the whole time. She was learning. She was remembering. And she was stronger than he could ever imagine. My life now is simple. I still teach. I don't need the money, but I need the purpose. I love those kids. I love their honesty, their resilience. They remind me that even after the darkest storms, the sun still comes out. I learned that the hardest battles aren't fought with shouting, but with silence, with strategy, with the quiet gathering of strength. The most powerful revenge is a life lived well, on your own terms, free from the shadows of those who tried to break you. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own storm, feeling that crushing weight of betrayal, I need you to hear me. Be quiet, be smart, gather your proof. Your moment is coming. Your inheritance, whether it's financial, emotional, or spiritual, is waiting for you. You just have to be strong enough to claim it. This is Amelia Reed, signing off. And living well. So very, very well.